Good evening and namaskar. We welcome you on another interesting session at Nisha's bookshelf under our campaign We Shall Overcome. Today, the author in conversation is Mrs. Madhavan. A very warm welcome to you, Kaveri ji.
Thank you, Nisha. I'm delighted to be here and so happy to support this really important work that you're doing. Um, you know, uh, Helping families during COVID time and also helping the arts and artists.
Ji.
They're the forgotten people, really.
Exactly. I mean, I think the artist community is ignored totally from all the governments everywhere in the world. So we thought that let's just do something for
Yeah.
them. So quickly, I would like to read out about your introduction. Kaveri Madhavan was born in India and moved to Ireland 33 years ago. She is the author of three books of fiction: Paddy Indian, The Uncoupling, and The Tainted. Kaveri has written for the Irish Times, Irish Independent, Evening Herald, the Sunday Tribune, the Phoenix, and Travel Extras. She lives with her husband and three children in County Kildare and is working on her fourth novel. So here is the novel, and I have just finished it in the morning, and it is such an interesting read, I must tell all the listeners. So let's just dive in, Kaveri. What took you to Ireland and what kept you there for more than 3 decades? I mean, what intersected between the two countries that kept you there?
Yeah, thank you, Nisha, for that introduction. We came to Ireland, in 1987, and we were just newly married. My husband and myself, we were only 23 years old, and my husband came here to Sligo in the northeast of Ireland. In the northwest of Ireland, as a young junior doctor. And for many years, we actually thought we would go back to India. But over the years, I think we found Ireland a very lovely place to live in, and we decided to make it our home. And so here we are now, 34 years later, and our children are grown up, and they have made this their home, and so it's our home now.
I can definitely, resonate with that statement because we've been working, me and my husband
Yeah,
have been working with Irish education since last more than a decade now. I'm 15, 16 years.
yeah,
And every time I ask my daughters that where do you want to go for summer vacation? And they would all jump in and say that we want to go to Ireland
Ireland.
because there are so many similarities between the culture, I mean, the family oriented
Yeah,
community. So, and they're all as hospitable as we Punjabis or Indians.
for
They
sure.
would welcome you in their house. So it's beautiful. So, what age did you realize that words had power, and that was the medium that you wanted to tell your stories and you wanted to express yourself?
Yeah, well, interestingly now, I actually realized the power of words even before I started writing, or before I even had plans to be a writer, because my first job, Nisha, was as a copywriter in an ad agency. So,
Okay.
I trained as somebody who, who wrote ads and, promoted products doing that.
Yeah.
So, the power of words immediately, you're even as a young junior copywriter, I could see, how something that you wrote would get people either buying something, or going to a restaurant, or buying a book. So I'd say that was my first realization of the power of words was working in an ad agency.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
much later on came the books and my own writing.
So, what was your age when you started writing and you started working on your first book?
So I would have my first book. I started actually working on my first book when I was about, oh, let me see now, 2000. Oh, quick calculations. I think I was about 30. I think I was about, oh, how old was I? About 35, maybe.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
That's quite
yeah,
young. Okay.
yeah. So it was something that happened, slowly. I actually, when I came to Ireland, in 1987, you couldn't get a visa
Yeah.
as an accompanying spouse. So, I did not have a job, and we didn't have children at that time. So, a lot of my time was spent reading. and I already was a very, very voracious reader, and I just became twice as more hungry for books and for reading, and especially Irish books and Irish authors.
Yeah.
So, from being a sort of a big, huge reader is how I became a writer, really.
That's great. I mean, yeah, I can relate to that. That yes, hungry for more books. Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, India and Ireland both were colonized by the British Empire, and
Mm,
both
mm.
have identical flags. So, was it intentional that picking up both the location, the country of your birth, and the country where you are now, so as the fictional home ground for the narrative that you wanted to say? So was it, choosing the locations, India and Ireland, in your book? Was it
Yeah.
intentional?
Well, I suppose you could say it was because I did not go looking for an Indo-Irish story. The story just landed in my lap.
Okay.
So I beg your pardon, just apologies. The story just landed in my lap. So, huge apologies there, Nisha. Really huge, huge apologies.
It's a,
No, as I was saying, I did not go looking for an Indo-Irish story. The story just landed in my lap, and it was just pure accident. I was in the Indian embassy in Dublin and overheard a conversation about this particular regiment, the Connacht Rangers, and what happened, and that they had mutinied in India in 1920. And I was so intrigued because I never even knew that there were Irish regiments in India under the
hmm.
aegis of the British Empire. So I immediately began researching it, and I knew the minute I had not even read a page, and I knew straight away, from just a very cursory Google search, that I knew I had a story that had to be told because so few people knew about it outside of academia. I mean, academic historians would be well aware.
Hmm.
Historians of the empire and historians of colonization would be aware of that incident, but otherwise even people in India don't know, and certainly many people in Ireland won't have known.
Yeah.
So, it was a story that fell into my lap, really, and I was very happy to write it. And I think I was best positioned to write it as well, being Indian and then also having spent more than half my life in Ireland.
Exactly, I can say that, research is one thing, history is another, but weaving a story around it and making it so interesting is something a wordsmith or an ace writer can do it. So before I delve into the second question, the next question, I want to read out an excerpt from your book. Sahib, picking girl. Mumtaz Bibi gestured towards the door of the first room. Inside, four young women sat together on a low sagging charpai, bed in a companionable tangle of arms and legs, combing and plaiting each other's hair. They looked up to him unhesitatingly and waited. Michael was taken aback by their bold demeanor and the frank curiosity on their faces. Mumtaz Bibi gave Michael a quick glance and snapped her fingers at one of the girls, who got up immediately and jumped off the bed. Once in the adjoining room, the girl unhooked a rag that hung from a nail and dusted the thin mattress on the charpoy. The pankha on the ceiling slowly came to life. Michael sat down on the charpai. The coir rope squeaked with his weight. The girl headed to the corner of the room where the floor tipped towards a rudimentary drain. A cockroach that had been lurking under a large earthenware water pot scurried away through it, heading outside. She was very dark, but not a smooth, inky black. Her skin was coarse and she was heavily built. Her feet were badly cracked at the heels. He noticed. Her eyes were lined with coal, and her palms and the tips of her fingers were decorated with a red stain. Her hair, very long and loosely plaited, glistened with coconut oil, the rank smell of which Michael found most disagreeable. Sitting uncomfortably on the charpoy, he wondered how he had let Tom Nolan convince him that this was the best way to spend his first week in furlough in India. So, my question to you is that, your book. first half is set in 1920s of India and Ireland, and the second half is somewhere around 1980s. So what kind of research went into it? I mean, the kind of scenario and the scene written here of a brothel in those times when the soldiers visited the Indian brothels, it must have took a lot of research and the work of fiction to actually explain it like this. So I would like to know that story.
Yeah, well, yes, there was a huge amount of research, Nisha, and actually, that's why the book took so long because I actually got lost in the research. The research was so enjoyable that,
Yeah.
for 5 years I actually didn't didn't write a thing. I was, under the guise of research, I was sort of, went all over the Nilgiri Hills and did a lot of trekking. Went to several army museums, both in Ireland as well as in the UK and in India. And so yes, there was a lot of research involved, but luckily for me, it was a time period where people wrote a lot of letters, they kept diaries,
Mm.
soldiers, and not just officers, but a lot of soldiers wrote letters home. And many of these things are preserved in military archives, thank
Mm.
God. And I was able to read them and use them. So also that whole uh, the priest in my story is very important. As you've read the book, so he plays a
Yeah.
huge role. So military chaplaincy, the military chaplains, their letters, their reports that they wrote are all really well preserved in military museums and in military archives. So that's
Mm.
how I managed to get a good bit of information.
I mean, heavy research as a piece of history. There goes a heavy research, but how to weave that in a narrative which is interesting for readers to go through that love story and have that history going on along the
Yeah.
lines. So how did you manage that? I mean, I was really interested. I was intrigued while reading, and I really wanted to ask you this.
Yeah, I think Nisha, the thing was, you see, I didn't. A lot of my research was done, very laterally. So I didn't sort of I didn't confine my research to regiments, to actual soldiers' lives or
Hmm.
to the actual events of the mutiny. I did a lot of lateral stuff. So, for example, I had literally by my bedside. I would every evening, and this is not an exaggeration. Every evening, I would actually go through this the Army and Navy catalog. It's like
Hmm.
a shopping catalog, for of those times.
Yeah.
And you could see what people you could buy. It's a 500-page catalog, and you could buy. It's the one I have is from 1931, so it's a little after the time period I wrote. But things don't change that much at that time, and you could buy anything from a safety pin to an elephant's tusk, like a coffin. You could buy clothes, anything, canvas, canvas beds, canvas baths, anything
Hmm.
that anybody needed could be bought in this Army and Navy catalog. So by just leafing through it, you could see what kind of medicines people were using, what hairstyles were in fashion, what crockery and cutlery were being used. So a lot of my research would have been not obvious, not the obvious subjects, but I would have looked at other women's magazines, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
Women's magazines are a real revelation, because you really got the feel of the social.
The community, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of social history that can be gained by reading old women's magazines, of that era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I can really imagine because on page 23, what I really loved about your writing style was the characterizations. I mean, they come alive in front of you. You can really see them while reading it. So I'm just going to quickly read a little excerpt here. Michael nodded, not knowing what to say, convinced that he had seen the young woman before, and yet not quite able to place her. She was slight, very pretty, and her light brown hair, fashionably crimped, framed her face closely. It was the color of her eyes that held his attention. From where he stood at the altar, they looked green. But now, as she sat in the second pew, looking directly back at him, so confident and unhesitant, he could see they were flecked brown and amber. I mean, I can really imagine a character sitting in front of me and, apply my imagination to see how she looked. So, which was your favorite character in the book? I know, I mean, for a writer, she's a mother and she gives birth to each and every character, and, no step motherly treatment to any character, but still, you must have a favorite character.
I do, and I mean, right from the start, it was the priest, and that's the reason I fed him right through
That's
the book.
Jamie.
I gave him loads of really lovely stuff to eat. It was almost like it was almost like he was so real to me. And also
Yeah,
because he was I liked him. I liked the fact that
yeah,
he was so human at the start. He showed his disdain for Anglo Indians, and how slowly he admitted he was wrong, and how slowly he changed his mind, and how central he
exactly.
was to the story. So it is funny because I thought about it a good bit later on after I finished writing the book, and I said I must have really loved this man so much, because from the moment you meet him till the very end, he's eating. I'm feeding him.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, cream rolls and pies and everything.
Yeah.
And Father Jeremy is kind of a character which every human wants in their lives. I mean, he doesn't react to whatever you're going through, and he would just take it in, and then very slowly and calmly he would react to whatever you said. So, yeah, even I liked him. So, when you were writing the book, I know, I mean, when a writer is writing, he or she doesn't think of the audience that forever, for whoever
Yeah.
he's writing. So, did you have any audience in your mind when you were writing this book?
No, Nisha, I didn't. I didn't have any audience in mind, but the one reader I was anxious about were actually the Anglo-Irish reader.
Yeah,
You know, because I wanted to make sure that I had got the Anglo-Irish story correct. So when I finished the manuscript, I actually sent it off to a couple of Anglo-Irish friends, and I told them, would you tell me, have I got anything wrong? And apart from one or two very small things, they gave me the thumbs up, and that made me very confident. So, I never thought about about who I was writing for, but I accept
mm,
that I did consider the Anglo-Irish reader, and I hoped that I had done their history justice.
yeah. I was going through and researching about your books and yourself and listening to the interviews. So I heard somewhere you were mentioning that some lady in India mentioned that why have you named your book Tainted? And she was
Yeah,
an Anglo-Irish, Anglo-Indian lady. And later on, when she read your book, she was really appreciative of the kind of position you
yeah.
have you have given them a very sympathetic year, and I think she was happy afterwards.
Yeah, and she's a wonderful woman, because she's actually an ex-professor of English in
Okay.
Chennai, in one of the colleges, in one of the leading colleges in Chennai, and her name is Eugenie Pinto, Professor Eugenie Pinto, and she's a wonderful woman, and I'm glad I'm glad she read the book, because
Yeah.
her initial reaction was, why would you call a book about that has Anglo Indians in it? Why would you call it The Tainted? But
Yeah.
I mean, my whole thing was, that's how three different groups of people in the book were tainted by association. The Anglo Indians because of their mixed
Mm,
blood, Anglo Irish also because of their mixed
mm,
allegiance. Neither fully English nor fully Irish, and then of course the Irish Catholic soldiers who were serving the crown when their own country was fighting for freedom. So three groups of people were associated by were tainted by association, and
mm.
and again, Nisha, I never set out to write a book that was sympathetic to Anglo Indians. I just wanted to give, uh, you know, uh,
A voice.
No, just
And
tell
I
it as
just
it is. Yeah, tell it as it
hmm,
is, And
hmm.
I hope I've done that. I hope I've done that,
Yes, I'm sure. And what is your creative process when you write a book? I mean, is it the creative process of writing a book? Does it overlap with all the other activities that you do in the day? I mean, it happens with me quite often that if I have a plot in my mind and I have to write some piece of poetry, it would go on parallelly in my mind, and whatever I'm doing, it would be
Yeah.
there. So does it happen with you also?
Well, I mean, it does in a way, Nisha, because the two things that I like to do other than reading and writing are gardening, and I love golf. So both those two hobbies of gardening and golf, are they're kind of almost semi. Well, golf is not solitary, but it can be.
Yeah.
And gardening is definitely for me a solitary activity, and so it gives you great amount of thinking time, both
Mm.
golf and gardening. So I find I do a lot of my thinking when I'm doing, when I'm either gardening or playing a round of golf, and very often I would play golf on my own, because I
Mm.
love to go out very early in the morning on my own, play my golf, do a lot of thinking, come back and write. So I do. It is like combining two of the things, three of the things I love together.
That's great because my husband would be very happy to know that I know a golfer in Ireland because he's a golfer, and he's been telling me, Nisha, you want to focus more, you want to concentrate more, then you should come and play golf. I mean, he
Golf.
has done everything to convince me to play golf, but I don't fancy it at all to go around a ball the whole day. So no. So I want to know, since I'm so interested, I was very intrigued with this novel. So I want to know the plot of your other two books also. I mean, The Uncoupling and Paddy Indian. What was that all about? What
Okay,
is the narrative?
Paddy Indian was my first book, and it was loosely based on our own experiences, coming to Ireland. So the story is about a young Indian doctor who comes to Ireland. He
Yeah.
falls in love with an Irish girl, but it's not
Oh,
a love story.
okay.
The book is about what happens to him, between him and his mother, because
Oh,
of him falling in love with the Irish girl. So it's not quite a love story. It's more to do with the relationship between him and his mother.
all right.
And
That's great. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and the uncoupling is a completely different thing altogether. The uncoupling is about a couple who are in their late 60s, and they're coming out of India for the very first time. They've had a very traditional marriage, very sort of uneventful, happy-ish marriage, and they come to England for the first time to visit their son, leaving India for the first time, and he doesn't have time to take them around. So he books them
Oh,
on a coach tour of Europe, 16-day coach tour of Europe,
okay.
and it's what happens to their marriage in those 16 days.
Oh, wow. Wow. All right.
So
So
it explores.
I'm going to get those two. I'm going to get those two now. So,
The the
gee.
uncoupling actually explores, sexuality, and um, it explores the sexual life of older people. So it's quite a different book.
Oh, wow, that's great. So, I want to know that, when um, you're rooted in India, but
Yeah.
you're a global citizen now. And me being in education since last so many years, I mean, we kind of send a lot of Indian students to study in Ireland. So
Yes. Yes.
I want to know that your kids were born and brought up there, right?
Yeah.
So how did you manage to have their hearts rooted in India and their minds winged and be this global citizen altogether? How did you manage that?
Yeah, I think when we decided to stay on, the day we took the decision to stay on in Ireland, my father actually, when we rang my dad, to rang my parents to tell them, My father actually gave me, a real boost, because he said to me, he said, always any plans that you make, always make your plans with looking ahead at your children. Don't make any of your plans looking behind at your parents. And that was a very generous thing for him to say. When I was ringing him to say we're not coming back to India, he turned around
Exactly.
and told me that. So it was a very generous thing for him to say. So, I mean, we took that on board quite a bit. And, we had then decided, okay, we're going to live in Ireland and our children are going to be brought up Irish. They're not going to be confused ABCDs. So we brought them up as Irish children, and all their Indianness just came by osmosis. Just from our daily lives in India. Something. How it is. There are some desi things that you just
Rituals.
cannot get out of your psyche. And just for
Yes.
example, one of the things is, when my kids came home and if they flung their school bags on the floor, I'd be saying, "My God, you can't throw your books on the floor. You have to have some respect for your books." So that kind of stuff. I think it just then after years and years, it comes to them now naturally.
Yeah.
So I mean, nothing was shoved down their throats, but they just picked up what they liked, and what they don't like about it they just ignore, and we've let them be like that. So my kids are no longer kids. My eldest is 30, so
Okay.
it's they're grown up and they're adults. My youngest is 25. I have three children. I have a girl who's 30, a boy who's 28, and then a girl who's 24.
Wow. And they're all in Ireland. I mean, they haven't gone anywhere. I mean,
Yeah,
okay, they're all there.
at the moment they're all in
That's great.
Ireland. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. So, we all read books. Sometimes we just read, but some books make us writers. I mean, some books inspire us to write. So, what were those books
Yeah, I can
for
mention.
you?
Yeah, I could definitely mention. A couple of writers. For me, in India, I mean, if you're looking at the Indian pantheon of writers, for me, Amitav Ghosh was a huge influence on me,
Hmm.
because I think he, for me, he exemplifies how history can be written into fiction in order to educate people about history.
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of books, a lot of his books. I learned Indian history from his books, because I read his books, then I was interested, and I looked up stuff that he was writing about, and realized how much of research he had done, and how authentic his fiction is. And then outside India, sorry, one other writer I'd love to mention, and that's Anita Desai. She had a massive influence on me before I started writing, even, because I just love her writing. And outside India, a non sort of other writers outside India, for me, big influence would be.
Come back, Kaveri, come back. So, this is the internet glitch. We are waiting for you, Kaveri. Come back.
Nisha, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can. I can now. I can. We lost you for a few
Yeah,
seconds.
apologies. Now, I
Yeah.
think I don't know what happened there. Apologies. So
Now this is perfect. Yeah.
yeah, so I was just saying, that we Barbara Kingsolver, I don't know if you read her. Yeah, she's a really fantastic writer, and her book, The Poisonwood Bible, would have been, one of my top favorite books. I actually love an Irish writer called William Trevor,
Hmm.
and John McGahon as well. So these would have been my big influences.
So that's definitely now established that you like history weaved into the
Yeah,
personal
yeah,
stories.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Fiction and history is your genre.
yeah.
So, India and Ireland both are intersected and connected in history, like, Annie Besant and Rabindranath Tagore, Y.B. Yeats. There are so many examples, Nora Richards. So, was it, there is a history in our countries. So all the three books that you have written, does it mention this connection? I mean, does it always inspire you to highlight this connection?
Not the first two books, but definitely the third book, because for me as well, that connection between India and Ireland, for me as well, was revealed only when I started researching this book. Before I wrote, I, I myself would have been not so aware, or unaware, I would say, of the massive connection. Absolutely massive.
Yes,
The more you,
massive. Yeah.
the more you realize how many and Irish women involved in India, and who are involved in the empire as well. So it's a fascinating subject, and I'm not my fourth book, not the book that I'm writing at the moment, but my next book,
Okay.
fifth book, which will come possibly 3 or 4 years from now. Uh, Already started.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, it's
That's great.
back in India, and I don't know whether you've heard of Margaret Cousins. You know,
Margaret Cousins.
yeah, she would have been part of the, very much part of the Theosophical Society, and she was quite an amazing woman. And so, I'm going to weave her into the story now. She's not going to be the main character, but she's going to be one of the peripheral characters in the book. So, I visited Madnapalle in South India last year, and uh, sort of went to see where they worked, and very, very interesting.
So every time you come to India, you must have had, your research locations that I have to go there and research about my next book, because you're there, and whenever you're coming here, this is India is your playing field, I guess.
Yeah,
So you know what, Nora Richards, you must be aware of Nora Richards, who was the Punjabi, great grandmother of Punjabi theatre. So we did a play, because since I'm associated with theatre, and
yeah,
I played Nora Richards. And when somebody from Belfast, he came to watch the play, and after that he invited me for lunch, and he said, "Bitnisha, you must do something on Sister Nivedita also. I mean, there's a brilliant life sketch there, who has done so much for India, and who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda." So I researched on her, and there is a play written by an Irish author on Sister Nivedita. So yes, that is on cards, but after that, the corona happened, so nothing could happen. So I also want to ask you about the cover. I'm very intrigued about the cover of your novel. It's
yeah.
so beautiful. I really liked it. And how did you, shortlisted this?
Well, I mean, that I have to, the literally I have to thank my publishers in India, Speaking Tiger, who commissioned that piece of artwork, and the designer behind it. So huge thanks to them. I think they really captured the spirit of the book
Essence.
cover.
Yes. Yes, that is definitely there. So, uh, thank you so much, first of all, to accept our invite and to support our cause in India. These are very unpredictable, grim times that we are, heading towards, and we don't know what is going to happen next. So, that is how we started We Shall Overcome, wherein we provide free meals, nutritious meals to the corona patients. And the browser publications, they have a doorstep delivery of discounted books to the patients who are isolating. And we also provide the ration bags and the groceries, medicines to the needy and to the artist community, because the one who was operating lights, or one who was only playing bansuri,
Yeah,
did not know that how to actually, now what to do
yeah,
when there was nothing happening in theaters. So thank you so much. A huge thank you
not at all.
to come and support us.
Delighted to be of any use at all, because as I said to you, we so heartbroken with the way the second wave has affected India. So friends, relatives, really sort of absolutely in any form.
Gee. Thank you so much. And I hope to meet you soon again for your next novel. And best of luck and best wishes. And maybe, whenever I'm in, God willing, if I'm in Ireland, I'll definitely come
Of
and see
course,
you. And whenever you're in India, please come and see us.
yeah, not if you're when you come to Ireland, not if, but must meet. You must.
Definitely. Yeah, Kildare is my favorite place of shopping any which way. So I have to be there.
Oh,
Right. All right. Bye. Good night.
so thank you.
Namaskar. Thank you. Thank
Namaste.
you.